over the last 2 or so weeks, I've been putting a few messages on Mastodon about configuration management and wanting a change, maybe make something of my own. A lot of us have moved on from managing machines with 600, 700, 800 resources or more, and more focusing on individual units, be it something in a module, and Puppet would own a single module. And you run containers, or you run it on top of some kind of a platform that's provided, and you just want to cater or care about this one component. I think there's a definite future in there where these very small, easy to reason about, completely isolated pieces of like almost microarchitecture is part of a whole system that composes together. And if you think, back to the Puppet days, we were always saying, yeah, you manage your system with Puppet, but then things like deploying your actual applications, Puppet wasn't very good at that. And so Choria, for instance, has some application lifecycle management stuff in it, but it was never very good at the configuration management side of the coin. And so there was always this split there where people end up using Puppet and Ansible or something along these lines. And so I'm rethinking a little bit about how I'm taking my application management stuff and expanding their focus into configuration management, but I want to stop at that boundary of a single module or a single unit of architecture. And so I'm rethinking about making a configuration management for the small scope, for the microarchitecture, for the individual module size, and where the entire decisions and everything you make is that boundary. And so 2 weeks or so ago, I put out a version of Hira, which is single file focused and renders the entire file in one shot. And I mentioned in releasing that it is towards supporting a configuration management system. And so I've done some work on this configuration management. It's very basic, supports only package at the moment, as you can see here. But it has all of the plumbing in place for types, providers, transactions, sessions, all this kind of stuff. It has a little bit of a manifest and APIs in order to integrate into other systems. And so it's very, very early days, but it's quite well formed. And so I will show that here. Now, there's a thing about small, and that is that, small basic stuff also scales really, really well. And so the autonomous units that I have in Choria, I've run those across millions of nodes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them per node. So you're literally looking at tens of millions of autonomous agents working together in a single system. And so it works because there's very small units that works together. And so having that being the need, well, I can also then go and say, let's make something small here that I know I'll be able to wedge into Choria in time. And so I want to make a CI CM system that is usable in the shell, in the CLI, and in shell scripts. And so if I do CCM package ensure ZSH, that does what this Puppet resource would do. Right, that's what just happened. It did an ensure present, and it is idempotent. I can run it many times as I want, and it's just going to do the right thing. I can say ensure absent, and I'm uninstalling it, and I can say again ensure, or I can say ensure present, or I can say ensure 5.8. It's idempotent. It's doing the right thing. Now, if you're thinking about writing shell scripts to manage your systems, this is where it was really difficult. How do you build all of this idempotency? How do you deal with this stuff like when a file changes, now only should the service restart, and all this kind of stuff that Puppet brought to us. But unfortunately, where we are today is, starter Puppet module ends up being 30, 40 files big, multiple directories. The rake output is just page of commands. It's unusable. And so I want to start where we can have a shell script that does those stuff. And so not implemented here, but you can imagine I want to go something like session start, in a shell script, and it sets a couple of environment variables. And this is a session that's being recorded. I can then go session file, ensure etc sshd config, and the properties for that file, and then I can go CCM service sshd running, ensure running, and subscribe to file etc sshd config, and that this will do the right thing. When in this session the file changes, the service will restart, otherwise it's going to do the normal idempotency tricks. So that we can get to 3 or 4 lines of shell script that basically does what Puppet did, even in the shell script. Because when I'm having a new laptop, I don't want to run Puppet on the thing. I don't want to have that level of configuration management commitment to my life, but I do want to set up my user and a couple of dependent applications and a couple of dot files, and then I want to manage the thing organically going forward. As my next change, just install the stuff I need. But maybe I want to restore my dot files to a pristine state. I'll just run my setup sh again, and that should give me the right things. And so you can imagine these commands I just piped out here, stick them in a shell script, and you've got your setup sh. Now, shell script isn't everyone's bag, so really you want a manifest, where you can capture a couple of stuff and where you can make some decisions. And so at the moment I have one of them that's in YAML. You may revisit the YAML choice. YAML is an easy way to start because you don't need to think too much about UI. Of course, you're just talking about the data interfaces into the system. But so here we have a Hira file. This is the Hira that I released 2 weeks ago. One file, one system. I'm thinking about the input into my module. What is the package name that I want to manage? HTTPD. I then go, what resources do I wish to manage? This is the list, and so I could have file, service, etc. Here I'm only managing the package, and of course package name has to be variable because differences between operating system. And so as this is a Hira file, I describe a hierarchy right there, and so I allow per platform OS overrides. And finally in Debian I set Apache 2. And so if I go CCM apply manifest, it sees there's one resource in there and it's doing the thing. Apache wasn't installed, so now it's gone and installed it. Apache was already installed, so it's not changed, it's stable. And you can see it's using the DNF provider and all this kind of good stuff. It is just top down, so you could even do absent. This is not going to have the same kind of stuff with Puppet where you can't manage the same resource twice, so you can do temporary stuff that you can clear up afterwards. It makes sense. And the system will support that. Now in here, of course, you're going to be able to support files and services and so forth and so on. And we have a little programming language over here. I could do things like downcase, and that'll work. It will make my FAQ output formalized. And so there's a little manifest. Now I have some facts here. If I look at the host, you can see it's really fast to capture the facts. Network. Yep. Host. This is fetch live. And so this is enough for me, but of course I will support some other options, maybe loading from external files and so forth. But this whole system is zero dependencies, dynamic. You just drop this thing in, and that's all you need. You don't need any external stuff. I should even be able to compile this file into a binary that you just run, and it does what the file says. Zero dependencies, not even this file. And if you're sourcing in any files, from let's say file resources, that executable will contain those files as well. The whole thing will be a standalone zero dependencies construct that you can just execute. This is written in Go, and so there's a Go API. If you wanted to do what this command does, in Go, you're literally looking at 5 lines of code without error handling. And so it's really easy to use, really easy to extend, really easy to plug into other systems, which is where it becomes really powerful. Because in Choria I have application management features that takes care of the life cycle of the application, and that means monitors it continuously, remediates it continuously, handles things like rolling upgrades in a cluster. I have, for instance, a 9-node system that is made up of 3 individual clusters, making up to 9. And within each of the 3 clusters, you can upgrade 1 machine at a time. The 3 clusters can each upgrade concurrently 1 machine at a time, and do that in a rolling fashion, and the software stays available. And so Choria's management primitives has all that stuff baked in. And they run autonomously, they run forever, they can run without any dependencies. And bringing this kind of configuration management into that world means I can go even further down the autonomy route, that you run setup binary and it install all the dependencies and continuously manage those dependencies forever, including upgrades and everything. So that's where I'm headed with that. I'll build somewhere in the middle between the CLI stuff and the manifest stuff and the Choria stuff. I'll build something in the middle there that makes a very easy kind of quote-unquote puppet server style deployment mechanism that allows you to distribute the kind of updates from a central point. Anyway, so this is where I'm at. It's there's not a lot there at the moment. You can do info ZSH, you can do uninstall ZSH, and so I would actually use this quite a bunch, because I do not want to use Debian systems. I don't remember Debian systems. I just cannot. I've been a Red Hat user since literally their very first beta, and that's what I like. And so not having to know all of the kind of package, weirdness between different operating systems, I would actually use this a bunch just to have a standard simple set of commands that paves over all of that complexity, and in the background does the right things. If I do debug here, you can see it's gone and run queries it, and it removes it, and queries it again, and all this kind of stuff. So the little types and provider tricks that Puppet brings, just to shell scripts or even to my CLI, super valuable. Anyway, so this is what I'm thinking about. I can make a follow-up video around the application management stuff. It's quite interesting, and we'll see how this very basic primitives here will make it into the world of very large-scale distributed systems, and hopefully have a system that can go from your shell to your shell scripts to your little deployable units, and all the way up to your network level, but forever thinking about single module scope. That's where I want to be. So I'm not going to add 500 more types and providers. I'm not going to add 500 kinds of options to package to let you to read locations and all this kind of stuff. I don't care. You should use your operating system the way it was designed. It's going to be small scope, and it's going to be doing things the way that the environments are designed. That's it. That's what I'm working on, and let me know if you have any thoughts. Thank you very much for your time.